I'd like to bring this special meeting of West Southwest Milwaukee School Board to order. Suzette, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Deal. Here. Mr. Sikich.
Present.
Mr. Keller.
Here.
Mrs. Carr. Here. Mr. Becker.
Here.
Mr. Burns.
Here.
Mr. Burns is on Zoom. Mrs. Lee. Here. Mrs. Kaiser. Here. President Lee.
Here. All right, so we'll move right into public comments this evening. As a reminder, everyone will get 3 minutes to address the board who would like to. Please start with your name and your address. You will not have any back and forth discussion with the board, but if there's a simple question that we can answer immediately, we will do so. Otherwise, any comments that need a response will be done so by the next regular Board of Education meeting. If there's anyone on Zoom who would like to sign up, there is a link in the chat to do so. Otherwise, we'll go right ahead with Mr. Equalized.
Organizes. Joe Mikolajczyk, 3355 South Russell Court, New Berlin. School district taxpayers do not need a community center at the Lane School. We already have an expensive center at 62nd Street, which, by the way, due to the board and administration's negligence during construction administration, cost taxpayers an additional $875,000 due to a scam. Nobody's ever owned up to that. No problems with that. That just money gone. You've been very dishonest and underhanded in informing the public about your plan for Lane. You did not inform the public until the same day you were to previously vote on this, and it's just rolled into the budget. Estimated cost to taxpayers range between $1.5 to $2 million per year for 5 years. That's a cost of $10 million. After the decision was made to close Lane and other district schools months ago, a consortium of churches made an offer to buy Lane for approximately $2.3 million. The board and administration ignored this offer, and they ignored them for months and months until September 27th, when you formally replied, "The building is not for sale." That's easy to figure out why you don't want a proper school that educates children compared to your abysmal, terrible, failing record of educating children. As far as I know, you have never informed the public about this offer. Administration officials and board members have stated they will not sell any buildings to be used as schools. This is fiscally irresponsible, but that's how this board consistently operates against taxpayer interests. Furthermore, this building is currently zoned as a school and not a community center. Zoning would need to be changed, and that is not a given. The only thing your proposal does is increase taxes for residents. Currently, West Dallas has the 4th highest rec funding in the state. Only Milwaukee, Madison, and Racine spend more money, and they have a much greater population than West Dallas, West Milwaukee. Enough is enough. Stop wasting our money. It's our money. It's not your money. Sell this building and forget your idea for a community center. I think you are deathly afraid of competition and don't want to lose control of this building. That's even mentioned in your flyer. You retain control of the building. Better yet, request proposals to sell this building to the highest bidder. Now I will ask you financial experts a question.
Thank you, Mr.
Accept an offer,
Mikolajczyk.
let me finish.
You're-
Accept an offer to
Mr.
sell the
Mikolajczyk.
building for 2.3 million or spend 10 million in 5 years. What's better for taxpayers?
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Gary Schmid.
Hello, I'm Gary Schmidt. I live at 2083 South 104th Street, right here in West Dallas. I'd like to make a couple comments about the October 24th meeting, if I could. First, I'd like to encourage the school board to consider the option of selling the Lane school site versus converting the building to a second recreation location fitness facility, especially if it does benefit the West Dallas residents from a financial standpoint. One considers there will be when one considers there will be fewer operating capital expenditures in the future, plus the sale proceeds which could be utilized for other needs within the school district. I believe it will be an overall positive transaction for both the school district and its residents. Second, I want to mention that transferring expenditures to the community service fund 80 line of the tax levy, which may have fewer restrictions, thus freeing up general tax levy dollars that are limited. When they both are added together, will ultimately cost the taxpayers more money on future tax bills. Keeping another building up and running, for example, will be an ongoing charge being included in the community service levy moving forward. Third, it sounds like there will be a future workshops for the community to discuss the various options for Lane and the school sites, which I was happy to hear about. Please let me know how to be included in announcements for these community workshops. And I know sale was one of the options, plus the other things to talk about. And fourth, when presenting the property value analysis related to levy with the budget, is it possible to estimate what the new value of a $100,000 home might be under the new levy? The reason why is because the budget presentation was based on a 14.7% increase in equalized property values. So in most cases, that means that that same $100,000 home is worth more than $100,000. In this case, it could be $114,000. If this is correct, then based on the levy that was presented, that means the property owner would be paying about the same amount in taxes versus seeing a $100 reduction in their taxes. Don't take me wrong, I do appreciate the levy, that it stays where it is or goes down. But I think for the most taxpayers, a comment was made with, look, the levies, the taxpayers are paying $100 less. They're probably not, because again, the values do go up and it should be reflected, just say what's net or different part of presentation. So it's easier for the taxpayers to know that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Steve Broadwell.
Steve Broadwell, 12965 West Ohio Court, New Berlin. When discussions were at their peak last year about what properties might be closed in the face of shrinking district enrollment, options for disposal were presented. Among those options was sale of those properties. Local church, which includes the school, has submitted a bid to buy the Lane property. Their analysis showed the purchase would be financially beneficial to the community in several ways. You rejected their proposal, simply saying the property is not for sale. So what's changed? Why have you not even responded to their multiple requests for in-person meetings to review? In a school board candidate forum organized by some district moms prior to the last election, one of the board members was asked if the district would consider selling to another school. The reply was a quick and firm, absolutely not. That was a clear expression of concern with any competition and how it would further dilute the district enrollment. I do understand your concern, but many studies show private schools outperform public schools. Is this fair to the kids and parents that would like an option that might just provide a better education and in a safer environment for their kids, not to mention the benefit to taxpayers? You'll never know because you won't even talk to them. A big part of the problem with public schools is federal funding they receive. Private schools don't get that federal funding and they're not dependent on that funding, which often comes with strings attached. They aren't compelled to follow federal guidance or mandates on remote learning, masking, and vaccines that are now all proven to contribute to the individual emotional problems we see on the rise in our public schools. You then address these problems by hiring more district psychologists and infusing SEL behavior modification lessons into all curriculum that seem to many like group therapy and only serve to dilute core academic subject proficiency. The district DPI report card score of 59, down from 71 10 years ago, places us in a meets few expectations category. With the district score being higher than only 9.2 of districts in the state, It's mystifying why you would deny the school an opportunity to at least present their case. Why won't you talk to them? The least you can do is hear this church out. Lane is already zoned for a school. Why go through a rezoning effort to add yet another recreation facility when West Allis already has the 4th highest rec funding in the entire state, despite being the 11th largest city? Only Milwaukee, Madison, and Racine spend more. You should focus on schools, not rec departments. You will not have performed due diligence on behalf of our kids or taxpayers until you talk to those interested in the property. A refusal to do so would certainly be remembered by taxpayers when you come to them for more money next time.
Okay, thank you very much. There's no one else signed up right now for public comments, but I'll wait a few seconds in case there's anyone who joined on Zoom late who hasn't an opportunity to sign up yet. There's a link in the chat for anyone who would like to address the board. All right, seeing no one else that signed up, we will close public comments at this time and move on to our action item for this evening. Item 4.1, the 22-23 final budget and tax levy adoption. Mr. Norris.
Good evening and thank you. I'm going to turn the screen over to the presentation here. And so this presentation is the same that was provided last week, one day at the October 24th meeting. And so just wanted to go through some highlights, maybe not as in depth as last Monday, but to kind of just go through it again. Ms. Strasser from our Director of Communications and Recreations here as well, to answer questions from the board as well, if there's anything that's come up from last Monday to today. But once again, just to kind of go through this a bit. So as each of you know, throughout the calendar year, we work through the budget process. It starts very early. We'll start engaging in that very soon here with enrollment projections and staffing and things like that. And it starts in January, and there's a number of board workshops through projected enrollment, staffing, prelim budget, and things that we work internally and present to the board. And we have those discussions throughout the year and every other year, given where the state's at with that biennial budget. There's added complications and more unknowns versus knowns, and leading into this year, there's more knowns than unknowns, which is good in terms of budgeting. So with that, all the accumulation of the work done by us in conjunction with the board leads up to the October certification of the of membership and aid from the state. And so that's really what leads up to the budget approval and the formal adoption of the tax levy with the community. And so with that, we'll jump in a bit and go through a high level, and feel free to ask questions as we go. So the formula the state uses. Oh, is it hard to see? Oh, sorry. Yep, absolutely. Sorry, Jane. So with the formula the state uses, really it's the revenue limit authority subtracted by aid and other revenues by the state. And when you subtract revenue limit authority by aid, it produces the allowable tax levy to the community. And so the revenue limit, the first part of that is really where our membership, the third Friday count, comes into play. So those are going to be students who are enrolled as students in the West Allis, West Milwaukee community. And those are resident students. And then also resident students who choose to open and roll out are considered members of our community. So it's not enrollment, it's membership. We do subtract out per DPI students who open and roll in, because those are not members. And so there's a kind of a reconciliation that happens at the end of the year where we receive funds for those students, and then we also pay out a percentage of the dollars for open and roll out students as well. So that's going to be the revenue limit authority. There's also non-recurring exemptions in there. So the state provides two main non-recurring exemptions we receive, both in terms of declining enrollment. One is literally called the declining enrollment exemption. And what that does is it allows school districts additional dollars to help them as they receive less students, they receive less revenue, and to allow them to kind of align their expenses with such revenue. And a good example of just that is school districts with declining enrollments, making tough decisions like we did last spring around closing schools. And so that is an example of school districts aligning expenses with revenues. And ultimately that's revenue limit authority. And then in the 15th of this year, the 14th, we receive our finalized equalization aid numbers, which allow us to get the produced tax levy. And just this kind of mentions just that. So this year, our total revenue limit authority, as I mentioned last Monday, is just over 92 million. That compared to the revenue limit authority of the last year was 93 million. So there's a total change in our total revenue limit cap of 9 million or $956,693 or a 1% decrease, which is consistent with declining enrollment. We would expect that number to decrease as we have less students. We would expect to have less dollars. Our equalization aid number has increased. And so that number comes from the state, and that's produced by the state in terms of how much money they are committing to our schools. And given that we are each year, there's an analysis around if your community is more property rich or property poor. So that number does fluctuate a bit. And so when equalized property value increases across the state, if your community's equalized property value increases more than the state average, you're going to get less aid. And if it increases less, then you would expect this number to increase. So even though we have less kids, it's kind of odd that this number would go up, but each year that fluctuation changes. It also is contingent on other districts. So if other districts who are heavily aided don't spend all their money because they want to save it, right? If they have a small fund balance, the state reviews that and goes, you didn't need all of that. And so then the pot of money gets distributed other ways, right? So that's part of the discussion we've had in different workshops around shared cost. And so it's not always as easy as the revenue limit to be able to say it's generally going to decrease this number. School districts have a little more control over. Yeah, go ahead, Jane.
So it might be appropriate to ask this now. Because
Sure.
we're talking about the formula. So
Absolutely.
if we would sell Lane, how would this affect our funding for state next year? Like, is that another situation where that would, could you please say that again?
Absolutely. So this happened a few years ago when we sold the building that we're in today. And so in that position the board was in and the school district was in, we sold the building and we at that time needed the dollars to be put to fund balance, right? A healthy fund balance should be about 20% of total revenues. And so we were not in a position where we had a healthy fund balance. So the board at that time and the administration, we were in a position where those dollars needed to be saved. So just as I said before, when you have a total net revenue that you don't spend every dollar, the state views that as you not needing it, and therefore you get less aid the next year. So if we go back to the formula, if revenue limit stays where it is or decreases and your aid significantly decreases, those dollars get pushed directly to the community. And so in a circumstance, to your question, where if we sold the building and the dollars were not spent or allocated as a shareable cost, those dollars, a portion of those dollars would be pushed to the community. Yeah.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. So by simply subtracting our total revenue cap by our aid, it produces a all funds tax levy of $40,194,962. That does include the increase to the Fund 80 levy that's being proposed this evening to show a total tax levy decrease of $31,616. So just some general updates from kind of the prelim budget in September at the annual hearing to today. So I mentioned this before, but one of the main reasons why some of the budgets are unknown, it's some of the factors I mentioned on aid. Aid's a big question. You know, the audits that go through the 1505s, all districts do, is essentially is how districts produce kind of what their total revenue and total spending was. And then the state does an analysis around which districts spent all their money, which districts didn't, what's their aid percentage. And then they have to figure out, well, who's going to get more aid the following year. So that's why these numbers are unknown, but other things occur in the budget cycle that are unknown too. One of them is private school vouchers. And so we saw an increase in expense. I know Dr. Lexman mentioned this at the last meeting too. Across the state, this has been an area where we've seen increases. So that expense increased just under $750,000. The first year of that expense is a direct levy from the community. And so as I mentioned before, we're about 50% aided, meaning for every dollar we spend, we receive 50% of it from the state and 50% of it from the community. Well, initially, the only way that those dollars are aidable is through the January count. And the $750,000, these students are going to be new to the private voucher system, meaning that we won't get aid for them until the following year. So this is one direct reason in terms of why the Fund 80 levy, the discussion that had happened previously was around $2 million a year. And that's why this decrease is here to maintain our commitment to decreasing the total levy to the community. Yep, go ahead. Absolutely. Yep.
I think this would be an appropriate time. So
Yep.
if I vote yes to the budget and we agree to the rec department's proposal,
Mhm.
will taxpayers be paying less money towards the school portion of their property taxes compared to the year before?
That is correct. Yeah. And I to the gentleman's question earlier, that's a good question, because the mill rate evaluation based on 100,000, if you look at it just 100 to 100, you see a significant decrease. But if you factor in equalized property value, 100,000 is really not 100,000, right? So just to go through that, 100,000 at a 14.7 increase, the new value of that home would be $114,700. In 21-22, that $100,000 home had a mill rate of $755, meaning they paid in school-based portion property taxes $755. At $114,700 with a mill rate of $658, they would be paying $750.12. So a marginal decrease, but a decrease. And really, that's why when you look at is the community paying less in taxes, the number really to look at is the levy decrease. Did the levy go up? If the levy went up, then that statement is not accurate. But if the levy decreases, it is generally accurate. And I say generally because it's not a universal truth, because, for example, if someone's property value goes up 14% and then they do an addition on their home value may have gone up 30%. So there's things like that, but it is generally the case that the school-based proportion of people's property taxes will decrease. Even though it may be marginal, it will decrease. Yeah, presently.
I think that's a really important point, because oftentimes we are asked to generalize things, but it really does depend upon an individual's property.
Yep.
Somebody's property could have gone up less than 10%,
Yep.
depending on what the assessed value was. And then they're going to be paying significantly less than their neighbor, maybe, depending on what's going on. Just like someone, like I said, may have gone up by more than that.
Yep.
So some people could conceivably pay more in the school-based portion of that based on what their home value ends up being, or significantly less.
Yep.
What we have to look at is the overall. We're given an average. That's how we're given. That's the percentage that we're given for property value increases based on an average across all properties.
Yep.
And so I just hope the public can understand, like, I can't talk to you individually unless I'm looking at your tax bill,
Right.
or looking at the assessed value of your home or business to really be able to say yes or no, you're going to be paying more or less.
Yeah, exactly. And the same is true if the statistics hold true at 100,000, 200,000 and 300,000. So people would see a marginal decrease in any scenario. So
On average.
on average, correct. Yes, on average. Yeah. So just kind of, these are the changes from the prelim budgets today. So what we got here. So this is the private vouchers piece that we just discussed. So one point to make. So our total levy proposal this evening is $40,194,962, and roughly the private school voucher being just under 5 million. That makes up about 12.3% of our total levy. And that's something that was not projected, but had come true. As I mentioned, a change from the prelim budget to today. So the breakdown of the levy is, like I mentioned, it's $40,194,962. So of that, the general fund is $32,576,452. Our debt service is taken out of that levy to make our debt payments. And so that is this year is $3,318,510. And the community service levy, which shows the increase of the 1.3 million, would the proposal would now be that it would be 4.3 million. And so to get into the mill rate piece, and I alluded to this a few minutes ago. So the total school-based tax levy, the 40,194,000, divided by equalized property value, which we had mentioned there was an increase through the state of 14.7 on average. That multiplied by 1,000 gives you the mill rate. So to go through that, this is the equalized property value evaluation that we were provided. We do not conduct that. That's provided to us by local municipalities in the state. So the 21-22 to 22-23, there was a 14.71% increase, which is just over $780 million, which increased that from 5.3 billion to 6.1 billion. And by using that same formula, with the increase to the funding levy, the mill rate would drop from 7.55 to 6.58, which is just under a 13% decrease.
Something I just thought of, since we in our district, we have 4 different municipalities for which we serve. And each one of those municipalities may be assessing people's properties at different rates. So to try to, I mean, we're not gonna be able to do individually by person, but maybe looking at what Greenfield did, what New Berlin did, what West Dallas did, what West Milwaukee did, as far as their average assessed value of home, might give people who live in those municipalities who are watching this or watching, looking at this later, a better idea of what they might be looking at as far as what the school portion might be. And if we could incorporate that into the, not now, I'm not asking for that now, but if we could incorporate that into the future budget discussions that we have. So
Like a
that people
breakdown.
who live in those municipalities might be closer to it, because I'm guessing it may not be the same across all 4 of those municipalities.
Like in here, how this
Exactly.
came to be. Yep, absolutely. That's no problem. That's the mill rate. So we went through this before. Essentially, if if someone new to the community moved in, the 658 is applied for every $100,000 of home value to be the school-based proportion of the property tax. So at 100,000, they would pay $658. At 200,000, 1,316, et cetera, et cetera. And this is the kind of comparison from the 21-22 mill rate to 22-23. And the 22-23 includes the recreation increased levy there as well. So you can see that, a significant decrease factoring in equalized property value. It isn't as significant, but there is a decrease either way for each property taxpayer on average. So with that, I guess I would take questions from the board.
I just want to say, Jane, those questions were great for clarification of what we've been hearing elsewhere, and I think I'm glad that was clarified. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
I'd like to jump in and just clarify a couple things that came up in public comments. I know we don't typically do this, but given that, this has gotten unique attention. So I think it's important, without going into what we discussed in closed session with our attorney that advises us on these matters. But we're not considering the offer because the building was never listed for sale. And I probably went a little too far being gracious with time and information for the group that is interested in buying Lane. Because what it creates is a possible jeopardy later if the board decides not to go down this direction tonight. And we do want to go out to a competitive bidding process. I've given an advantage to one of the bidders, right? So that's a little problem that it creates for the board not to go further into that consideration until you make a decision about this particular proposal. The other thing that did not come up at all tonight, which I think is important, is just the value of the gym space, right? And I know we've talked about that already in the process, but to revisit that, because for us to replicate that gym space, even though there's an offer to try to share it, and that comes with its own complications, but to replicate it is a $10 million project. And we certainly don't have that in a plan anywhere. And so those pieces I think are worth just visiting one more time before you make a final decision here. I'll give us some direction of where to go next.
I would agree, Dr. Luxman, and some of the pieces here that I know Ms. Strasser had shared with the board, and adding on to what Dr. Luxman said, each phase of this plan that preliminary, Shelley has put together, and she's here tonight. If there's anything I missed, Shelley, feel free to come on up. It allows the board to have like contingencies in place, meaning that, if something is to change with how school finances are done, or if equalized property value changes, it allows us to have, an asset that we need for the community, being the gym space. So if something were to change and the board next year, the levy time said we can't do this amount again, there's contingencies in place for us to be able to backtrack, to be able to still provide the necessary pieces that at least at this time we definitely need. And
Can you go back a couple slides where you talk about the vouchers, I believe it is, about how it's 23% of our budget? Or
12.3, yeah.
I'm sorry, 12.3. I don't know why I had 23 in my head, but still 12.3 is a significant amount.
Mhm.
And that's money we're paying out for kids that are no longer in our district.
Mhm.
I think that's important to know. I've heard people and I've seen people on social media saying we're afraid of competition. It's not that we're afraid of competition. We want to provide the best possible education for the students in our district, whether there's other schools here or not. That is our goal. But when we have that much of our budget being taken,
Public taxpayer.
public taxpayer money being taken to pay for kids that are no longer attending our schools, that handcuffs us. That limits what we can do. So I think it's important to recognize that, because that is a very significant part of our budget that I don't think gets talked about enough.
No, I don't. think so.
I would agree with that. It's accurate.
I agree. We represent the public schools. We are here for West Dallas, West Milwaukee School District. And so we are going to fight to make sure that we have the best situation for those kids. We want all kids to get a great education, but it's our job to look out for the kids in West Dallas, West Milwaukee School District.
So I want to make sure if you double check with Mr. Burns. I don't know if he's.
I was gonna let everyone talk here.
Oh, sure. I just remember.
And I
writing
will
somewhere out
not
there.
forget about Mr. Burns. No, certainly not. How could I? Jane, the other one.
I have a question for Aaron.
Yeah.
So Aaron, you're the director of finance. And so from a money standpoint, if we sell Lane and we get 2 million something, we'll have that money. And you're saying that that could work against us in some ways. Do you feel that by receiving the rent every year from the rec department, do you think that it's fiscally better to do that than to sell the building? Like in the long run, do you think that it is better for us to do that financially?
Good question, Ms. Carr. So I guess the first point I'd make is that if we are to sell the building, there are methods we can do to make that shared cost eligible, but it would create a discussion, at least with the board. The challenge, I think, is, as we heard in the community and things like that, to replicate that space just to build it is north of 10 million. And that's before we find the land. And so from a fiscal perspective, to be able to remodel and at minimum keep the gym, I mean, you're $1 million, $2 million to do that. And so just to have the gym space somewhere else is north of 10 without finding the land. So just from that perspective alone, I mean, it's hard to like create a different financial argument of why it's wrong. So, and then on top of that, long-term, depending on what happens with future levies and things like that, there's an opportunity to expand that into more offerings for the community. And I think that's an opportunity for the board. And having control of that and being able to guarantee to community members that your taxes will go down, because having some control with a commitment to do that is a good thing, I think. So, yeah.
Thank you.
So while the gym space is definitely a consideration, I want to note that I don't think it's a primary consideration when we're making this decision. However, with that said, I do think the general public who might not have kids who are athletes or might not have kids in the school at all really understand some of the limitations that we are facing. And obviously, with Lane closing as a school, any athletics that were done there would cease to exist. But can you tell us a little bit about some of the different programs that are really, for lack of a better term, fighting for that space? Can you give a little bit of insight to that?
I'm gonna tag in Ms. Strasser here. I certainly could, but she could much better than
And
me,
the whole
so.
5-year plan, like, I want to hear that again.
Yeah, we just wanted to hear Shelley
Yeah.
talk.
Yeah.
Oh, we don't need that.
Thanks for doing that so nicely, though. Appreciate that, yeah.
So that, I mean, you guys bring up a good point. It's not necessarily about more gym space. We want to preserve the space we have. And that space we have at Lane, we can't, without building, replicate anywhere else. We offer adult Zumba, yoga. We have special events that we run in that space. And really, and I've mentioned this before, when it comes to our adult programs, those are programs we rely on to generate revenue. That revenue helps to offset a significant portion of our programs, either in youth that either break even and or that we use budget dollars for. We have a number of programs, our aquatics, before and after school care, our adaptive therapeutic rec programs that do not make money, that we use budget dollars offset. So it's really important to have those adult programs be able to do that. Our adult sports leagues are another one. We compete with other entities, private entities to do that. And there's a number of things that we're up against that are out of our control that those places maybe provide for some of those programs. But there's a lot to be said too about creating spaces that community can come together to do those things. And that's one thing our schools and our department and our gyms provide. So it's basically our adult sports, adult fitness are the two primary consumers at Lane.
What about from the youth sports standpoint? How does that factor in terms of the space that is needed? Because I've heard that there's, a number of programs who really either don't have it at optimal times or just have to really fight to get that a suitable gym space for their program.
Yep, and that's kind of goes back to we don't need more. We need to preserve what we have. We have elementary school gyms, but a number of those are all tile floor, no air conditioning. I just learned today that one of them has 2 less basketball hoops than it had in previous years. So that's not an option for basketball anymore. So yeah, when we look at our junior programs and then also our rec sports, we want to provide a decent environment in which for them to perform. It's like saying you would offer, I don't know, hockey, but not on ice. You want to have the right facilities in which for them to play. The size of Lane's gym is regulation high school court. So yeah, in some cases, it's the ideal size for older kids, but it also provides the opportunity for multiple teams to be in there at a time. So we use it for rec and for our junior programs.
And me having worked at Hale for 5+ years, any Saturday in the winter, those gyms are both full. And so if we're talking about long-term being competitive, offering, almost unlimited time in gym spaces for our youth sports to really come together, especially through the consolidation, having your hands tied around like when we can use it, is it regulation size, is it across town? I mean, these are things that come up. And so to me, that having the Lane facility is a huge piece for the athletics community, I think.
I mean, I think it's also important to note that it's become somewhat of an auxiliary site for our high school athletics too.
Yeah.
There's a number of dates where they are practicing at Lane. Our high school program is because of other athletic events going on in the facility. So in order to provide those students with practice space that's safe and appropriate, they're coming over to Lane.
Is on the table still a possibility of moving administration to Lane? Or is that not?
So it is in kind of the brainstorming discussions we've had.
Right.
Right now, we're exploring a little more deeply 9333.
Okay.
That is an option, but part of the vision of the recreation center at Lane is a fitness center. right? So open to the community, but also a new benefit for employees. And that's something we probably would budget for in terms of providing that kind of membership. And then it might make sense to actually have the wellness center and the fitness center in the same facility. Then there's enough room at 9333 for administrative offices. But that's getting, that's probably 2 horses ahead of the cart. right
Sure,
now.
I know. I just kind of wanted to
Yeah.
double check.
And to speak to Jane, you asked kind of about the 5-year vision. It's really what it is, a vision. And we, knowing that this is a year-to-year process, makes that planning, that vision a little more challenging. But I mean, the things that we know, we've heard of routinely, people walk into the rec center and ask where the fitness center is or where the fitness equipment is. So we know there's a need for that in our community. So that's one of the items, and that's our first kind of thing we're looking at. Additionally, we're looking at spaces for just multi-purpose space. With other schools that are consolidating and just looking at the gym spaces, having multi-purpose spaces that are large enough to accommodate a variety of different things. And we do have that luxury there that there's air conditioning in that building. So that makes a huge difference for a lot of programs. So some renovation there. We've talked about looking at some culinary type of space, which we don't currently have in terms for rec planning. And a big vision, and it's a pretty big vision, is a warm water pool. And like we discussed, we have pools, but accessibility and temperature that this type of space would just provide a whole different. So these are new opportunities, not necessarily just replicating what we're already doing in spaces we already have. These are new opportunities. So we'd be reaching potentially new community members that we haven't previously served.
And Shelley kind of hit on this a bit a minute ago. But the goal here in terms of creating this space and dedicating some fund, increased levy dollars to do so, it's not something that, in my opinion, the goal will be to do forever, right? It'd be to create the space, and that's why we've talked preliminarily about doing a short-term lease, because part of this is going to be once the space is built, similar to what Shelley had mentioned around. There are some areas where Shelley and the recreation department do create revenue, and this might be an area where that happens. So by creating revenue, it allows you to reduce the funding levy. And other communities have done that, like dedicating dollars to create programming, to reevaluate, to reduce the levy. That way you're really creating a community service program at a low cost to the community, if anything, none. And there are communities that have done that before. And so I think that's something that, is in the horizon, but it's something that, we would look at, I think, really hard to try to do. So.
The other thing I wanted to bring up, I think this is a good time, that I know we talked about, but I don't know if the public knows so much, and Kristen and I were kind of talking about it, is it was mentioned in comments, as far as the, us having to upkeep another building. But I know that was brought up where I think, well, both of you in earlier times had mentioned that upkeep actually does not fall on us. That would be the responsibility of the rec department. So I just kind of wanted to make that known so the public understands that that is not something else that we would be taking on top of it. As far as the whole not selling it and getting rid of it, we wouldn't have that responsibility of upkeeping the building. So I just wanted to make sure that the public realizes that would not be on us. I think that's a pretty big thing.
If memory serves, the operations costs are going to be covered within the regular budget. Was that right?
Correct.
And Shelley has a track record of being able to do that with the current recreation facility as well. So, increasing programs, increasing revenue, being able to maintain space without increasing levy. It's already happened. So.
If we lost the gym space at Lane, what hardships would that provide to some of our current programming and our sports within our schools?
And ultimately, it creates competition amongst ourselves, where we're pitting ourselves against each other, where we're having to choose. And how do you place value on each of the different programs that's offered? And that's ultimately what we would have to do And, you know, you never, I guess I wouldn't want to have to say, well, this program generates revenue, so it's more important than this one that doesn't, but this one serves kids. And isn't that truly what we're here for, is to serve, you know, the kids? So it will create some hardships. And again, some of these programs can be moved to different spaces and gyms, but they're not necessarily the best spaces to meet the needs of the programs. And that's one thing that's been talked about when we look at our programs and preparing our kids and, you know, people that we're up against, other districts we're up against, and the facilities that they have and that they can offer. We now would have even less of that to offer to our community and our kids.
I think one thing too that had come up in a previous meeting and really goes back to the facility master plan is I believe, and maybe Dr. White, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the only regulation size elementary gym we have is Mitchell. So when we talk about creating like not ideal spaces, that's what we're talking about. Having teams practice in a non-regulation size court.
And it's a
And-
tile floor.
Yeah, it's a
Mitchell's a
tile
tile floor and,
Yeah.
and like the bound lines are basically the wall. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I just want to clarify, it's not like we don't like the paint in this room, on ideal. It's like, it's not regulation size, it's not fit based on WA recommendation, things like that are what we're talking about. And that's, I think, what Shelley's getting
Yeah.
at there. Yeah.
Other questions? All right, I want to give Mr. Burns an opportunity. Mr. Burns, it's your time to shine. If you can hear me.
Let it be known, I made
He gave
sure.
a thumbs up. He says he's fine. Okay. So if there's other questions, I'd look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
So moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Burns, what is your vote? I didn't see it. Can't see.
We got a thumbs up.
There's a thumbs up.
Can you guys hear me or no?
Exactly.
I can pull it up.
Okay. Oh, I can't.
Oh, you can get some more?
All right.
I can pull it up if you want.
So resolution 1 and resolution 2.
Yeah.
Don't need it first time, right?
Right, it's just, yep.
All right, so I guess we're gonna do this again.
We're just playing safe because this is the last day to do any of this, so just make sure we don't
Oh.
Okay.
end up with out a levy.
So after this, I'd look for the motion after I read this.
Okay.
Resolution number 1, be it resolved that the school district of West Dallas, West Milwaukee et al. School board adopts the 22-23, 2022-2023 final budget in the Department of Public Instruction format as presented in the final budget document. And resolution number 2, be it resolved by the school board of the school district of West Dallas, West Milwaukee et al. As follows. Section 1, there is hereby levied a school tax of $40,194,962 upon all taxable property of said school district for the uses and purposes of said school district as set forth in the 2022-2023 budget as follows. General fund, $32,576,452. Debt service, $3,318,510, and community services, $4,300,000. Section 2, the school board clerk is hereby authorized and directed to deliver to the clerk of each municipality having territory within the school district West Dallas, West Milwaukee et al. A tax levy certification showing that proportion of the amount of school taxes to be assessed against the taxable property of that portion of the school district lying within each such municipality as required by section 120.17 parent 8 of Wisconsin statutes. Such proportion shall be determined from the full value certified to the school district clerk under section 121.06 parent 2 of Wisconsin statutes.
So move to approve.
Second.
Any last minute discussion? All right, once again, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
One more time.
Aye. Is it not working?
Right, that passes. And then I would look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.